Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to my channel. I'm sorry I haven't posted a lot of videos lately. I've been busy with college and with class and with life. Some of that's starting to wind down now, so hopefully in the next few weeks I can get some of my video backlogs done, including a review of the Super Nintendo Mini that I have, maybe start even looking at the NES Mini that I got also a few months ago. And I can tell you right now, I love these mini consoles. Nintendo did a great job in the emulation, in the controller design. They're great little toys that aren't very expensive for what you get. $60 for the NES Mini's great price. $80 was a little steep for the Super Nintendo Mini, but considering everything you get with it, including an unreleased game, definitely worth the price if you had any nostalgic towards the Super Nintendo. But one of the things I do want to talk about in this video was something Nintendo said last week that I 100% agree with them. Full thumbs up, is that they're not going to create an N64 classic. And I thought that was a great idea. And here's why. A lot of fans demanded an N64 classic after the Super Nintendo Mini was released, just watching YouTube videos. And I've always thought that would be a bad direction to go. You see, the NES and the SNES were the golden era of Nintendo. It's when they were at the top of the market. A lot of the games that they had on those collections were, for the most part, exclusive games and exclusive series to either the NES or Super Nintendo at the time. Super Castlevania 4, for example, was exclusive to the Super Nintendo its entire lifetime. Mega Man X was an exclusive series to the Super Nintendo. Final Fantasy III premiered on the Super Nintendo and was pretty much exclusive to it when it was released. When you look at the N64, you don't see much from these series. The Mega Man X series went to Sony and became Sony exclusives. X4, X5, and X6 were exclusive for their time on the Sony PlayStation. Castlevania did hit the N64, but I don't think a lot of people want to replay Castlevania 64. It's not as bad as a game as a lot of people like to make it out to be, but it's not a great game by any means that I necessarily want people to pick up for any nostalgia memories. It's not a really great representation. Capcom could release Mega Man 64 onto a classic N64 collection, but all Mega Man 64 was is a very watered down version of Mega Man Legends. So there's not a lot of third-party support. Final Fantasy went completely away from Nintendo for a long time after Final Fantasy VI. So there's not much third-party games you could put on that system. I guess you could put Mischief Makers. That's the only real third-party support that I remember purchasing and actually enjoying for the N64. What made the N64 lineup good was the first and second party, and you're going to run into problems there. Rare that made a lot of N64 classic games like Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, Blast Corps, Perfect Dark, are now belonging to Microsoft, and so do those games. I mean, Microsoft and Nintendo have a decent relationship with each other. They have put Rare games onto the Virtual Console before. Donkey Kong 64 did release with Jetpack, so I'm pretty sure Nintendo had to do some legal finagling there in order to get that onto the Wii U Virtual Console. But that would still cost a lot more money to get those games than it's worth. And of course, the one game every person who owned an N64 had and loved to play, GoldenEye, is going to be lost to legal limbo. Okay, that would be a super expensive game to try to get and put on a mini console. So already your game lineup isn't going to be great. Nintendo could easily get these games onto a Virtual Console service easier, because most of the games that you would be able to get on an N64 Classic that you would want to play are all first-party games anyways. Then you get into other logistical nightmares. The N64 had 4-player games and 4 controller ports, which means the console would either have to come with 4 controllers, making it super expensive, because if it cost an extra $10 to $20 to put in a classic Super Nintendo controller on the SNES Mini, Just think about how much it's going to cost to get 4 N64 controllers. What, maybe 40 or 50? So you're already talking above $100. And on top of that, when it comes to the classic controllers on the NES and SNES Mini, the games benefit from them having the original control layout, and my nostalgia is benefited from using those controllers. Nostalgia is not going to be very beneficial when it comes to using those N64 controllers, because the N64 controllers were garbage. Now, I'm not going to bash Nintendo for their design. I thought for what they were, the design of the N64 controllers were okay. Nintendo didn't know if their analog stick would be a hit or not. You know, analog sticks had been used in the past. They usually were prone to failure, and they weren't that popular. So Nintendo made it a point to make sure that if the analog stick wasn't popular, people could still use the D-pad and have it set up like a Super Nintendo controller. That isn't my main complaint with the N64. My main complaint about the N64 is with the analog stick itself. They're uncomfortable. They're not wide enough, and they're too thin at the base, so they break really easily. I remember several years ago, after I bought Mario Kart 64 on the Wii U and just using the Wii U controller to play it, saying, I wonder what this is like on the N64, because it felt so differently. And at the same time, my youngest brother had found my old N64, had hooked it up, was playing Mario Kart 64, so I decided to sit down and play it with the original controller, just like it was supposed to be. And I remember my thoughts was like, holy shit, playing with this controller is like driving a car with a club attached to the steering wheel. It sucks in comparison. Your classic controllers that Nintendo releases nowadays, just even a GameCube-esque design controller, has way better analog sticks and way better feeling than the N64 controllers. I don't want a replica of that. These games are better off playing with other controllers that aren't the original. So there's the 3 strikes against why an N64 Classic is a bad idea, and I'm glad Nintendo sees it that way. Now, that's not to say Nintendo should sit on their N64 library. They really screwed the pooch with it with the Wii U. They brought it out so late in the game to their virtual console, and they only had a few small handful of games on there when it came to the N64. What they need to do is get these games out onto the Switch, the sooner the better, and just release their entire slew of first-party games that they have available to them. Don't let them out in drips. Release the whole slew. Release 15 or 20 N64 games in a month. Get them all out there. Encourage people to go out and buy classic controllers that they can use for other games that aren't necessarily designed for those Joy-Con controllers, and do it that way. I think if Nintendo did that, the N64 people would be happy. It would be a great way of showing the N64 library. It would be a great way for people who didn't have an N64 to experience that library, way more so than releasing a freaking mini console. This is Tommy the Game Master, thanking you for listening to this rant. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below. I'll see you guys later.